All right, so here we go. This is a repeat story. I think it's already had 1 million sub hits on it. And unfortunately, I made this video, was it 2 or 3 years ago? It was right after I was healing from that mosquito bite. And more or less just kind of playing, and that's when I was first discovering that everybody was actually really loving the hunt stories. And on the editing program, I mentioned it before, if there was any additional sounds put edit into the video, the volume sounded great on the editing program, but for some weird reason when you load it up to YouTube, the added in sounds go way higher, and it distorts and ruins everything. And back then the sounds weren't recorded in stereo either. So anyway, this story needs to be retold so it's a little more clear. There's definitely going to be thousands of people out there who haven't heard this story yet. It's a doozy. And as well, the audio from this is going to be used in a new podcast, which is going to be launching within a month. So here we go. And just so all you guys know, I mean, I don't know why my memory's been on fire since I was a kid. I can remember the craziest conversations and experiences very, very accurately, and that's probably why I can tell a story well, a recollection story well. It's nothing scripted. I don't write anything down. It's just I'll even try to remember some stories to tell as I'm driving down the road. Like, oh yeah, I remember that time. Or I'll be having a beer with buddies and hunting camp or whatever and telling bullshit stories, and all of a sudden I'll remember a cool one. And oh man, I got to tell that story, and then I'll forget it again. Like right now, I know there's a handful of stories I completely forget, but I'll remember them eventually, and I'll get them shared on here. This story goes back about, usually, people have called me, I usually say, 6, 7 years, 4 or 5 years. I just rattle those numbers out. If I had to really sit down and think accurately, this story happened probably 8 years ago, possibly 9. And once again, I'm not a gun guy, I'm not into guns, I've never reloaded anything in my life. And a gun is like a tool is to a mechanic is what a gun is to me. I had a 300 Ultramag Remington 700, which is basically a small missile launcher. And it's a gun that I use. It keep anybody fairly secure between the ears for if and when the 1 in a million goes down. This shit flies with a large grizzly charge or any kind of charge, wounded moose, bull moose, or whatever. It's a very significant piece of equipment to use to keep you safe and stop a charging large game animal. A friend of mine who's right into guns had worked up a bunch of loads for this particular rifle, my 300 Ultramag. To be straight up honest, over the years of my hunting career, the only rounds I've ever seen fail are from hand loads. I've never had a round fail that I bought from box on the shelf in a store, ever. And to be honest, I don't go near hand loads anymore, ever. And when I first told the story, a lot of people, I think I've seen this comment about 5,000 times. Why would you ever trust anybody's hand loads? Don't ever trust anybody's hand loads. Well, I don't. It was once. Okay? And like I said, I'm not the gun guy. I'm not the reload guy. I'm not familiar with it. And when you let a somewhat professional gun handler, gun enthusiast reload your bullets, you're not familiar with it, you're not going to think that it's a bad thing to do. And obviously I do now. So this is what happened. I had these shells reloaded for me, and off I go into guide camp for the season. Just so you know, once I leave the highway, when my rifle goes in the scabbard and I saddle my horse, I load the thing up, never put one in the tube, and those rounds stay in my rifle basically for the whole guide season, because you don't unload your rifle completely when you get to camp, because you never know when you possibly may need that firearm. Obviously, you're in the middle of frickin' nowhere. And where we were this particular season is we were about a 10-hour horseback ride north of the Alaska Highway, about halfway between the Yukon border and Fort Nelson. How's that for positioning? Remote. I mean, when we go back into those mountains, there's nobody. The moose, the grizzly, the mountain sheep, the stone sheep, the elk, they see us, and they see us only for a few months of the year, and once we leave, that's it. During this time, grizzly bear hunting was still open in British Columbia, and it will be open again, mark my words. Where we hunt grizzly bears, they typically avoid us like the frickin' plague. They are scared shitless of us, which on average any popular hunted game animal is terrified of us, big time. And they show us a big wide berth of space when they come across us or smell us or see us. You'll hear people on online or on hunting forums, the true paranoid people, I call them, they're terrified of bears. It's always the same people that say they get charged every single year. And meanwhile, they're weekend warrior style hunters. They're not full-time hunting guides. And believe me, that does not happen that common. You know, in all the year, what I've been at this gig for 20 years guiding plus, I've been running around British Columbia hunting for, I don't know, 30-something years. And I have been charged by grizzlies unprovoked. Charged, like bluff charge. I've had a few bluff charges, big deal. They huff and they puff and they bounce towards you a few times, and that's about it. You know, a lot of people, I got charged by a grizzly bear. All right, well, I could say that about those incidents, but actually what happened was I was bumped into a grizzly, scared them, they huffed and puffed at me, jumped at me twice, and turned around and took off. No big deal. If you tell me you were charged by a grizzly bear, what I believe a grizzly charge is, when their ears go back, they focus on you, and they're coming at you doing 40 miles an hour. That's a bear charge, okay? Not a bluff charge. But anyway, it's not that often. And probably 99% of the grief I've ever had with predators, I started it first, okay? And it's from hunters wounding them or me stalking them to kill them and getting busted or on the shot. And that's when I've had my grief, except for one time. Now this particular fall, like I said, we got the same rounds are in the gun for the whole fall, okay? And it's the September, to start off with, it's September 1st to 10th hunt. It's the first hunt, and it's usually a moose and elk combo hunt, and possibly grizzly if the guy's got a tag. And this particular hunter had a moose and elk tag, guy from the States. And we're on this ridge, a sharp ridge like this, that went down, and then connected to a mountain face in front of us. And on this side of the ridge was a big basin, and that side of the ridge, big basin, went down, you could gloss across and call for moose or elk on either side. On the top of this ridge was maybe about 10 yards wide, and there's a major kick-ass game trail along the top of it. And if you went along the top of this ridge, then it would dip down about 10 or 15 yards in depth, and then it dipped back up and straight up that mountain face. And before I got onto that ridge, we're way back the other end of it, about 400 yards, and I could see this huge sow grizzly bear on that face with her three-year-old cubs, and you can see them here. I took a video of them, and this is the actual bears right here. And they're grazing away, and the sun's up. It's getting kind of warmer out, September, and nothing's really calling. And I didn't want to go out on that ridge and start calling yet, so I wanted to see where those bears were going to go. And they were way up the mountain. You know, they were probably, as the crow flies, when they finally lay down and went to sleep way up there, I don't know, I'll bet they're 1,000 yards away, probably, and that's a long ways away. And I watched them, and there's a burn up there, and as they get up the tree line, and they disappear, and they finally lay down up there somewhere. But they were predominantly going uphill and away, feeding away. Threat gone. So we went on the ridge, and I called for elk over here, bugle for elk. I'm calling for moose over there for maybe an hour. It's getting hot. It's too hot out. But you know, when you're guiding, you don't go back to camp. And I always urge people when you go hunting for yourself, don't go back to camp. You leave in the dark, you come back in the dark. You stay out there all day long. You don't know when it's going to happen. And it's definitely not going to happen if you're sitting in camp. So what we typically do is we hunt hard for the morning until it gets real hot out in early season, and then we do what the game does. You lay down, you have a rest, and you relax, and you wait during that hot afternoon. So I did a bit of calling for about an hour. That was happening. My hunter, he's having a snooze. I'm sitting there glassing. And then I'm kind of laying back for a minute, and then I hear him wrestling. I kind of listen, and then I hear him. He goes, hey, I hear something. I'm like, what? And now that dip in the trail is right below us. It's right there. We're right up on this little hump. And it's willow, willow about up to here, deep. And he goes, here's something right down here. And I'm thinking, what the hell is it? Maybe could be something coming along the game trail. So I come over, and I'm listening, and I look ahead, and on an angle right there, about 15 yards, all of a sudden a grizzly bear, one of those 3-year-old cubs stood up. He's looking at me. I'm like, oh shit. And I go, don't run. And all of a sudden the other one pops up, and the other pops up, and I go, don't run to the hunter. But meanwhile, too late, he already bucked. He turned around and took off. The first grizzly cub that stood up, he turned around and took off. And you know what? I don't mind that at all, because if you can Google up a couple of the latest grizzly attacks the past few years. A couple guys got shot by accident while the attack was going down. One was a panic guy, shot the hunter. And I think another guy shot his dad by accident or something. So that happens. So if that's going to go down, I definitely don't need a guy who's terrified winging a loaded rifle around if there's a bear charge, especially 4 of them. I don't need to get shot in the back of the head by accident. So anyways, moving along. He took off. So I'm standing there and I've got my Ultramag. And I got one in the tube. And I'm aiming at these things. And the 3 cubs stood up and the mom stood up and looked at me. These things are 15 yards away. And if you know anything about bear encounters and charges, she should have charged me. Why she didn't attack me that afternoon is beyond me. I haven't. Why she didn't even bluff charge, I haven't a freaking clue. It's still to this day, it's amazing. I'm so fortunate she didn't attack me. It's mind-boggling. But anyway, I'm totally calm. I mean, I got a freaking cannon in my hands. I'm totally calm. I'm aiming at her, and I'm not yelling at her. You know, a lot of people yell and scream at predators when they see when they're having a close encounter. You know, with a black bear, for sure. Because a black bear's coming at you, he's coming at you to kill you, to eat you. There's no other reason. Or a big cat, they're coming to kill you, to eat you, and they're testing you to see how much of a struggle it's actually going to be to kill you. So you do want to scream and make noises and lunge at them and throw sticks at them and throw rocks at them and be aggressive. That's when you do that. But with the grizzly bear, especially a sow with 3 3-year-old cubs that are at the age where they attack you too, you do not scream and yell at them and get aggressive. You do not want to raise the energy of that situation with her. At all costs, you don't do that. So I stood there and I'm talking calm in this tone I'm talking right now. And I just got the gunner. I'm like, don't do it, Mom. I'm a human being and I'm going to blow your head off. You know, like, do not do it. Don't do it. And I'm totally calm because if she is going to come and get me, she's downhill. I'll just drop to my knee and I'll shoot her in the face. And that'll be the end of it. And if I have to shoot another one of those cubs, I'll shoot it too. So everything's cool. And I got 100% confidence in my weapon and myself, and everything's fine. And then, so she drops down, and she starts ripping back and forth, growling and hissing and making these disgusting sounds. And she's ripping back and forth, growling. And I couldn't quite see her because just the buckbrush and the willows moving. And I'm like, you know, it's a pretty intense situation, obviously. And the cubs are looking at her, and they're looking at me and looking at her, and almost like you could almost read them. You know, it was almost like they're like, are we going to get him now, Mom? Are we going to get him? Are we going to get him? And then... and she ripped back and forth probably 2 or 3 times, and then whew, she ripped off the side, and she kept on going. And then all the cubs dropped down, and they all went with her. I'm like, all right, game on. Chalk that one up as another experience, right? Now, take note, I pulled that round out with the bolt, pushed it back down, and moved the bolt over top of it, and that's how my gun rides, and that's how it stays, all right? Now, moving along, that hunt got done. He actually went home with a real nice big elk. I don't think he did get a moose. He missed a moose. He missed a moose at about 8 yards in the timber. Another story. And now I got another guy, Henry from California, great guy. Is that King Henry? King Henry? The trail mix and peanuts and stuff mixes, and you see in the Shelton States, that's him. Big SCI, Safari Club International member, great guy to hunt with, experienced hunter. And we had some misfortune, and Henry knocked down a monster, one of the biggest bull moose I ever frickin' seen. We knocked it down and got up and took off, and we lost it. And I remember I went looking for that moose for a couple days, and with that same gun, with the same round. And potentially, you know, a couple days later, still trying to find that moose. It didn't die. But if it did, you know, you're potentially going to come up on that moose with a huge grizzly on top of it in thick bush. And you know, more often than not, that bear is going to rush you and attack you. So thankfully that didn't happen, but that was the thought that came in the back of my mind. You know, I went looking for that wounded, potentially dead moose with this gun, with those same rounds in the gun. And then what happened? So then another day during that hunt after that episode, we woke up and it was absolute shit-eating storm out. It was pissing rain and fog and everything, and nobody's going out. So we slept in, stayed in camp. Then it started clearing up around noon. And I have a spot not too far from camp where you got to go behind the cabins, down to the creek, past the shower stall, up the main horse trail, up to the timber, and over the first rise. And over that first rise, I tie up the horses, and we hike down about 200 to where I took a chainsaw years ago and I cut out this big opening so I could glass to all the mountain slopes even farther, again, for big moose and sheep, and have a little fire or whatever. So it's a nice close hunt. It's good for days like this. You got a half day. So we went there and left camp. Take note now, we left camp around noon, maybe 1 o'clock. So we got a few hour hunt for the afternoon. So we ride up there, and the trail's been there since 1968 or something. I mean, this is a major horse trail right close to camp. It's pounded down. It's got dirt on it, and tracks really show up on it real good. So we rode, take note, this is creepier than shit. We rode up the trail, tied the horses up, and hiked down a thick bush to this opening and sat there. Glass for a few hours. And then it's probably an hour to get, last light we got like maybe 40 minutes to get back to camp. We hike back up the horses. We get the horses and we're riding back down the trail, and we get about halfway down. And I glance down, I'm like, oh shit, look at the grizzly bear tracks right on top of our horse prints coming up the trail behind us from when we first came up. I said, hey, I gotta check this shit out. Look at this bear. He's like, oh yeah, it's a pretty good one. I go, yeah, it's a pretty big bear. He came up the freaking trail in the middle of the day behind us, which is odd because 90% of grizzly bears are nocturnal in that country, especially where we hunt them, especially big old boars. They are never out in daylight, next to never. So we're riding down the trail, and now we're getting close to camp. I mean, camp's right down there downhill, about 300 from us, and the other horses are running the bells on him, and his track is still on the trail. I'm like, what the hell? So this grizzly had actually came on top of our trail almost from camp in the middle of the afternoon. We got 2 little boys in camp too. It's just kind of odd. So what I was thinking was, okay, well obviously this bear was coming up the valley, coming up the creek, looked up, saw camp, and jumped on the horse trail and went to go around camp and went up the trail. That's what my brain's telling me, obviously. So I'm watching for tracks still, and I'm all the way down to the creek where we get our drinking water, where our shower stall is right there, and his tracks came from right there, going up the trail behind us. I'm like, holy shit, man. So now it's getting gloomy light. It's getting, it's very, very getting dark out, and we go up to the hitching post, top the horses unsaddled, put on the bells and hobbles, off they go. And we went into by then Henry and the other hunter were in the cabin, and I am getting undressed out of my shit in the guide cabin because I had to, unsaddle the horses and shit. And then I'm coming around the front porch of the cook shack, the airstrip's right there, cook shack, and here comes this frickin' grizzly bear ripping around the front of the frickin' cabin. I'm in the cabin, I dive in the cabin, slam the door. Mark's like, is there a frickin' gun in here? Is there a gun in here? And then Mark had a 30-06 in there. My Ultra Mag is in my other cabin. And we open up the cabin door again, and this thing's like, rah, 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 making all these disgusting frickin' slobbering sounds. It wasn't a monster bear, it was a boar. I think it was 7 foot. I think it was 7'4" or 7'6". But anyway, here's this frickin' bear trying to get us in the porch of the cabin. Unbelievable, never happened before. And so we slam the door again, like, holy shit, shoot that frickin' thing, man, shoot it. Like, you shoot that, what? You shoot that bear. That thing's obviously got some emotional problems, and you can't have a bear like that doing things like that in camp, especially with a couple kids or in a camp and a wrangler who's got to go out and get horses in the morning, 4 in the morning in the dark. So we open up the door again, and boom, Mark drilled it. And so it goes running around camp again, launches off the bank into the willow. And you can hear this thing gurgling and dying, growling, and making it sound of the willow. And I said to Mark, I go, let's go in there and finish that. Let's go finish him quick. Because you do not want to shoot a grizzly bear in camp and have it go disappear in the willow and not know where it went and not know if it's dead. You don't want that to happen. That's very, very bad. So I go running to my cabin, put on my headlamp, grab my rifle, jack one in the tube, the same round that I've been jacking in the tube since the beginning of the fall. And I go running into the willow towards the sound of this grizzly bear gurgling and growling and spitting in the bush right there. The willow's this deep, you can't see him. I got the headlamp on. And I come up on him, and he's right there, and he's 90, he's dead, he's dying. His lungs were actually hanging out the other side of him. There's a perfect shot from 30-06, Mark drilled him one. And I didn't have to shoot the gun. You can see a picture of the bear right here. This is him right here. And so it's pretty exciting. I jacked that round out and pushed it back down on the rifle again. And then we went back to camp, and the next day we had to spend the day skinning that thing out and getting rid of the carcass. because you don't need that carcass in camp. And yes, grizzlies eat dead grizzlies. and we got the carcass out of there, drug it off with a horse, and skinned it out, filled out. We all filled out witness reports for the conservation service, and that's what went down. So now a grizzly tag came available, and we were going to go. Henry was contemplating buying the tag, and it's kind of funny because he's asked me, he's like, what do you think, should I get the tag? And I'm like, dude, get the tag, trust me, get the grizzly tag, we'll get a monster on Grizzly Gulch. And he waffled on getting the tag, and I'll show you the bear we videotaped here that day, because he goes, well, let's just go out and see if we can find a bear first. And I'm like, dude, if we don't have time, your hunt's over in 2 days or 3 days, and you need to buy that tag 24 hours before you go hunting them. And he did buy the tag, and sure enough, we found this monster frickin' bear. Check this thing out, easily over 8 feet, and we found him. But anyway, backpedaling. Before that day, now that I realize we're potentially going to go looking for grizzly bears intentionally, I said to Henry, I go, okay, well, let's shoot our guns. You know, we've been through a lot here in this hunt, and now let's just make sure our guns are still on. So Henry pumped one out of his rifle. It's still on. I jacked that same round into my rifle, the same round that I was pointing at that sow and 3 cubs that should have attacked me. The same round I had in my gun when I was going through thick bush, potentially looking for a 2-day-old moose carcass. The same round that I went running into the willow with the headlamp on to finish that grizzly bear with already got a hole in it. And imagine if it came lunging at me, that same round. And I took a shot. I pulled the trigger and nothing happened. It went click. I'm like, what? And then I looked at it, I opened up the bolt and pulled that empty shell out, and a wisp of smoke come out of the shell, and the barrel was clogged. And my buddy back home, who had hand-loaded all those shells, had forgot. So, well, I don't know. I don't know anything about hand-loading, you guys, so don't ask me how. I haven't a frickin' clue. All I know is there was no gunpowder in that shell. And the primer was enough to push the lead into the tube. So once I realized what potentially everything I had just gone through the last 2 weeks, my knees, I remember vividly, I still remember obviously, my knees started turning to rubber and wobble. And because I should be dead. I should not have survived that. You know, imagine if that sow came flying at me, which he should have, I would have pulled the trigger, nothing would have happened. I would automatically just jacked another one and pulled the trigger again, would have blew the gun up in my face, and she would have finished the job and tore me to living rat shit, and I would have died. 100% I would have died. I should have died. The bear, oh yeah, and take note, after the grizzly tried to get us in camp, tried to get me in camp, get us, I want to find out where that thing came from the next day, and I backtracked it. And you're not going to believe this. So that bear was in camp at noon. It followed my hunter and Henry and I, all the way up followed us up the trail. We tied up the horses and went down and sat. It sat on us up there somewhere. It sat on us. And then that bear followed us all the way back to camp. And then decided to charge on the porch. Is that not a mentally handicapped, emotionally disturbed frickin' 1 in a billion grizzly bear? Like that moment, that episode right there is absolutely mind-boggling, frickin' amazing. I still cannot believe it. Like a grizzly bear like that, okay, he wants to kick my ass or somebody's ass. He's already sitting on me in the thick bush up there. That bear could have killed both of us at any time he decided to. That's how much they outclass us. We were just sitting there talking about who knows, we were bullshitting, using our spot scope binocular, looking at a mountain. You would never suspect in 10 seconds there is a mature grizzly bear stalking your ass behind you from downwind in the thick bush. He would kill us both like that. Why he didn't kill us both then, I haven't a freaking clue. Why he followed us from the thick willow, why he didn't pounce on us in the willow at camp at noon. Instead, he followed us all the way up the trail, sat on us. Why he didn't pounce on us up there, I haven't a clue. And then he followed us all the way down, and then he said, let's get it on. We're at the cabin. Absolutely frickin' crazy, stupid, bizarre. But get back to that round. Imagine if when I went running in there to finish him off with my headlamp and he was very much alive and I went click, he would have been on me, shredding the living shit out of me. Mark would have blown him off me with 30-06 for certain. Who knows what kind of shape I would have been in by the time he managed that. But that made me feel absolutely sick. And then it's funny, I borrowed I was Henry, another hunter, had a satellite phone, and I got the satellite phone. I phoned my buddy. I go, hey man, remember we were joking about you drinking and not putting gunpowder in my rounds? Well, just guess what? Guess what just went down? And then I got off the phone. He said he just about puked when I told him that. And my legs got wobbly, and you know what? I developed a shake. I must have took every round out of my rifle for the rest of that fall and shook it and felt it to make sure there's powder in it. I'll bet you I did that. I did it all day. I did that with my rifle probably every half hour, 15 minutes. I couldn't stop myself. I developed a shake. You know, for a lot of you people who said, you can't shake and feel the gunpowder in a bullet. Well, yes, you can. And when I first did this video, and other people said, oh yeah, like you wouldn't notice the difference in the weight in the shell when you put it in your rifle. I'm like, who would even think of that? Me? Me? I got bullets, I got rounds sitting all over the place. They're in the ashtray of my truck, they're in my pocket, and my vest. I got, you know, and I'll get a few of them at a time. I'm not picking up a frickin' round and going, oh, does this have gunpowder in it? Nobody does that. You grab a handful out of the box, bing, 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 you put them in your rifle, you're done. Get your head out of your ass. For all you dumbasses that said I should have felt the weight of the round being different, no. Unless you're intentionally looking for it, paranoid, worried, wondering if there's no gunpowder in the round. But no, you don't ever, I've never wondered that before in my life. I don't know anybody that has. So there you go. That is what happened. And that is one of, it's not that exciting of a story, but I will tell you what, that is one of the most creepy, insane episodes of my entire outdoor career I've ever lived through. I just can't believe it. You know, I mean, I should have pulled the trigger on that round 2 or 3 different times, plugged the tube with a chunk of lead, jacked another one there, pulled the trigger, blew my face off, and got annihilated by a grizzly bear. Unbelievable. Like, think about that one. The amount of 1 in a millions that happened in this entire past story is a little bit much. But that's what happened. And I definitely don't wish that upon anybody else. And I know there's going to be 10,000 comments on this video after its launch of you saying, never trust somebody's hound loads. Never trust anybody's hound loads ever. What are you thinking? There you go. I said it. Now you don't even have to comment it.